Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call. The Hindu Kush mountains stretch below like jagged teeth against the Afghan sky. Sergeant Corey Pearson crouched behind a crumbling wall, his rifle scope trained on a compound 300 meters out. 5 weeks into this black ops rotation, and the mission parameters kept shifting like desert sand. His earpiece crackled. Viper 1, this is Overwatch. Package is moving to extraction point Bravo. Copy that, Corey whispered, adjusting his position. At 38, he'd spent 15 years in special operations, the kind of work that didn't exist on paper. The kind where you disappeared for months, and your family learned to stop asking questions. His family. Sarah, his wife of 12 years, back in Portland. And Luke, his boy, 14 now, probably taller than when Corey had left. Smart kid, honor roll student, baseball team captain. The satellite phone in his tactical vest vibrated, an anomaly. Personal calls didn't happen in the field. Ever. Corey glanced at his spotter, Jim Noble, who shrugged. Answer it, brother. Overwatch approved the signal. The voice on the other end belonged to Wesley Pratt, Corey's oldest friend and the only civilian who knew what Corey really did for a living. Wesley ran a private investigation firm in Portland, the kind that handled discrete problems for people with money. Corey. Wesley's voice was tight, controlled. You need to hear this. It's about Luke. The world narrowed to that single point, the phone pressed against his ear, the dust in his throat turning to concrete. 3 nights ago, Luke was at a party in southeast Portland. Good kids, no trouble. But someone called in a noise complaint. 8 detectives showed up from the Metro Gang Task Force. They claimed they smelled marijuana, probable cause to search the house. Corey's jaw clenched. Luke doesn't touch that stuff. I know, but these cops, Corey, they tore through those kids like they were enemy combatants. Luke tried to film it on his phone. He knows his rights, just like you taught him. Detective Eddie Alexander grabbed the phone, smashed it. Then his partner, Ray Knight, slammed Luke against the wall. Said he was resisting arrest. The mountain air felt thin, insufficient. They beat him, Corey. All 8 of them took turns. Batons, fist boots. The other kids tried to intervene, got the same treatment. But Luke got the worst of it because he tried to document what they were doing. They beat your son unconscious in front of his friends, then charged him with assaulting an officer and destruction of police property. Corey's breathing had gone shallow, mechanical. Training kicked in. Compartmentalize, assess plan. Where is he? Emmanuel Hospital. Intensive care. Subdural hematoma, fractured skull, broken ribs, ruptured spleen. They induced a coma to let the brain swelling go down. The doctors. Wesley's voice cracked. It's 50-50, Corey. The compound below exploded. Another team's work. Corey didn't flinch. Sarah? At the hospital. She hasn't left his side. The cops filed their reports claiming Luke attacked them first. 7 witnesses say otherwise, but internal affairs is dragging their feet. These detectives are connected. Corey. Eddie Alexander's father is deputy chief. Ray Knight's uncle sits on the city council. The other 6, they're all part of the same crew, working under Captain Theodore Levy. They've been running enforcement operations for years, padding arrest numbers, planting evidence. They're untouchable. Nothing's untouchable, Corey said quietly. There's more. I've been digging since the incident. These 8, Alexander, Knight, Marco Clements, John Turner, Brennan Sargent, Colin Simons, Sean O'Neill, and Ricky Riley, they have a pattern. 23 excessive force complaints in the past 3 years. 12 formal investigations. 0 consequences. They operate like a gang themselves. And last night, I tracked them to a warehouse off Marine Drive. Industrial district owned by a shell company. What were they doing there? Celebrating. Wesley's disgust was palpable. I got surveillance footage. They're passing around a bottle of whiskey, laughing, reenacting how they beat your son. Knight keeps mimicking Luke's voice. Don't you know who my father is? They're treating it like a hunting trophy. Corey stared at the burning compound, watching black smoke rise into the mountain sky. Somewhere in that smoke was a high-value target who'd terrorized 3 provinces, now reduced to ash and memory. Text me the warehouse address. Corey, I know what you're thinking, but these are cops. I'm thinking my son is in a coma because 8 cowards in badges beat him for exercising his constitutional rights. I'm thinking they're so confident in their immunity that they're celebrating. And I'm thinking you didn't call me just to deliver bad news, Wesley. You called because you knew I'd want options. A pause. The warehouse. They meet there every few weeks to divide up cash from their side operations. Shakedowns, confiscated drug money, they don't report protection schemes. It's their clubhouse. Tomorrow night, 11 p.m., they're scheduled for another gathering. Intelligence suggests all 8 will be present. Corey's mind was already mapping vectors, calculating timelines. How solid is your intel? About a source inside the department. Someone who's been building a case against Levy's crew for 2 years. She's a detective in narcotics, Camille Draper. Good cop trapped in a dirty system. She wants these guys gone as much as you do, but she needs evidence that'll stick. She's willing to look the other way for 48 hours if it means someone finally makes these bastards pay. 48 hours, Corey repeated. Through his scope, he watched his team establish a perimeter. Mission accomplished. Time to extract. I need to get home. Make some calls. Already done. I contacted Captain Abraham Doty, your CEO. He's been briefed on the situation. He said, and I quote, Sergeant Pearson has been operating at an exceptional pace. He's due for emergency family leave. 48 hours, effective immediately. Corey felt something unclench in his chest. Not relief, but clarity. Purpose. Wesley, I need you to do something. Give me blueprints for that warehouse. Traffic camera locations. Employee schedules for every business within a 2-block radius. Cell tower data for the area. And I need to know everything about those 8 detectives. Where they live, where they drink, who they love, what they fear. You'll have it in 6 hours. One more thing. Sarah can't know I'm back until after. She's got enough to carry. Understood. Corey. Wesley hesitated. Luke's a good kid. The best. He didn't deserve this. No, Corey said, watching the team begin their extraction. He didn't. But those 8 detectives are about to learn what happens when you hurt someone who matters. When you think you're invincible. When you celebrate in the darkness because you believe no one's watching. He terminated the call and turned to Jim Noble. We're done here. Package secured. Extraction in 20 minutes. Corey nodded, already mentally cataloging gear requirements, tactical approaches, risk assessments. 23 hours in transit. 1 hour to review intelligence. 24 hours to prepare. 48 hours of authorized leave. 6 hours per detective. They had no idea what was coming to that warehouse. Chapter 2. Homecoming Shadows. The C-17 touchdown at Joint Base Lewis McChord at 0400 hours. Corey moved through the base like a ghost, signing paperwork with one hand while messaging Wesley with the other. A nondescript sedan waited in the civilian parking lot. Wesley's work again. The drive to Portland took 3 hours. Corey didn't stop at home. Instead, he drove to a storage unit in Gresham, one of 3 he maintained under different names. Inside, tactical gear that didn't officially exist. Tools for problems that required solutions outside normal channels. He was methodically inventorying equipment when his phone buzzed. Wesley had delivered 6 encrypted files containing everything from tax records to dental appointments for each detective. Corey began reading. Eddie Alexander, 32 years old, 7 years on the force. Father was Deputy Chief Ronald Alexander until retirement last year, but the connections remained. Eddie drove an $80,000 pickup on a detective salary. Bank records showed cash deposits every month, irregular amounts. He co-owned a bar in northwest Portland with Ray Knight, a place called the Badge and Gun, popular with cops. 2 ex-wives, both with restraining orders. Gambling problem. Steroid prescriptions from 3 different doctors. Ray Knight, 35. 10 years as a detective. Uncle was City Councilman Marcus Knight, who'd pushed through favorable police union contracts for a decade. Ray's file was thicker, 12 brutality complaints, including one where he'd broken a suspect's arm in 3 places during an interrogation. The department paid $150,000 to settle that case. Ray lived beyond his means. Townhouse in the Pearl District, European car, vacation property in Bend. His girlfriend, Marcella Austin, was a former dispatcher he'd met on duty. She filed a domestic violence report 2 years ago, then withdrawn it. Corey continued through the files. Marco Clements, the oldest at 41, started as military police, dishonorable discharge for conduct unbecoming. Portland PD hired him anyway. Specialized in asset forfeiture, the polite term for legally stealing property during arrests. His cases showed a pattern. Low-level drug busts that somehow turned up large amounts of cash, which disappeared into evidence, then vanished. Internal Affairs had investigated twice, found nothing conclusive. John Turner and Brendan Sargent, partners for 5 years. Both in their late 20s, both former college football players who'd washed out. They've been disciplined multiple times for excessive celebration during arrests, literally high-fiving over suspects they tackled. Social media was full of them at shooting ranges, flexing for cameras, posting thin blue line memes with captions about warrior cops. Colin Simons, the tech guy, 33, background in computer forensics. He'd been accused of planting evidence on suspects' phones, text messages, photos, to strengthen probable cause. One case got thrown out when a defense attorney proved timestamps were doctored. Simons received a written reprimand and kept his job. Sean O'Neill, 37, former SWAT, removed from the team after he accidentally shot a family dog during a no-knock raid. The dog had been in a crate. He transferred to the gang task force, where his aggressive tactics fit better with Captain Levy's philosophy of proactive enforcement. Ricky Riley, 29, newest member of the crew, former Marine, 3 tours in Iraq, came home with PTSD and an anger problem. His background investigation showed red flags, bar fights, road rage incidents, a domestic call at his apartment. Portland PD hired him anyway. His personnel file contained notes from his field training officer, excellent tactical skills, concerning emotional regulation. 8 men, 8 careers built on intimidation, violence, and impunity. 8 people who'd beaten a 14-year-old boy into a coma and laughed about it. Corey's phone rang. Wesley, you get the files? Reading now. What about Detective Draper? Camille? She's solid. I've known her for 3 years. We worked a case together involving identity theft. She transferred to narcotics to get away from Levy's crew, but she's been documenting their activities, building a paper trail. She knows what you're planning isn't exactly legal. And she said if someone were to, hypothetically, create a situation where these detectives confess their crimes, recorded confessions, detailed admissions, she could ensure that evidence reached the right people. The FBI has a civil rights division investigating corruption in Portland PD. They'd love to have something concrete on Levy's crew. Corey smiled without humor. Confessions. That could be arranged. She also said to tell you she's not asking questions about methods. Her exact words, justice has many forms, and sometimes the official channels need a push. I like her already. Corey, I have to ask, what are you planning? These guys are cops. They travel armed. They have backup. They have the entire system protecting them. I'm planning to meet them on their turf, at their clubhouse, when they feel safest. Corey loaded a magazine, checked the action, functioned smooth. They're celebrating what they did to Luke. That means they're confident, overconfident. They'll be drinking, relaxed, not expecting problems. 8 against 1. I've faced worse odds. In Afghanistan, with air support and extraction teams. Wesley, these aren't soldiers. They're not warriors. They're bullies with badges who've never faced real consequences. They beat up teenagers at parties. They plant evidence on people who can't afford lawyers. They operate like a gang because they know the system protects them. Corey's voice was clinical, detached. But I'm not the system. And in that warehouse, there's no union rep, no internal affairs, no deputy chief father to make calls. Just them and me. Silence on the line. Then, the warehouse is owned by a shell company registered to someone named Terrence Decker. He's a former cop, now runs private security for strip clubs and drug dealers. Word is Levy's crew does off-books work for Decker, and in exchange, They use the warehouse for their meetings. The building's scheduled for demolition in 3 months, so nobody's paying attention to what happens there. Perfect. There's one more thing. Your son, Luke. I went to the hospital last night. Talked to his doctors. The brain swelling is starting to go down, but they won't know the extent of permanent damage for another week. Sarah's there around the clock, but Luke's teammates from baseball have been visiting. They told me something interesting. Corey waited. Luke filmed the beating before Eddie Alexander destroyed his phone. But one of his friends, kid named Bobby McCarty, he also filmed part of it. Hung back, kept his phone hidden. The video shows the whole thing. Eddie shoving Luke, Ray Knight throwing the first punch, all 8 of them joining in while Luke's on the ground, not resisting. Bobby gave the video to his mother, who contacted a civil rights attorney. The attorney gave a copy to Detective Draper. Does the defense attorney have it? Not yet. The charges against Luke are still pending. But if someone were to create a situation where those 8 detectives confessed, detailed confessions matching what's on that video, it would make for a very compelling case. Federal charges. Civil rights violations under color of authority. Conspiracy. Corey felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. Not anger. That was too hot, too imprecise. This was something else. Focus. Clarity. Send me the warehouse layout and security details. I move tomorrow night. It's already in your encrypted folder. Corey? Give them hell. The line went dead. Corey spent the rest of the day at the storage unit, preparing. His military gear was too identifiable. Anyone who saw him would know special operations. Instead, he selected civilian tactical clothing. Dark cargo pants, compression shirt, light jacket. No insignias, no unit patches, nothing traceable. Weapons. He chose a suppressed Glock 19 with subsonic ammunition, plus a Sig Sauer P226 as backup. Tactical knife. Zip ties. Duct tape. A trauma kit, because even controlled situations could spiral. Non-lethal options. Pepper spray, taser, expandable baton. He wasn't planning to kill anyone, though the thought had crossed his mind more than once. But death was too easy, too quick. These men had beaten his son while Luke begged them to stop, then celebrated. They deserved something more thoughtful. At 1800 hours, Corey drove to Emmanuel Hospital. He parked 3 blocks away and walked, avoiding the main entrance. Wesley had provided Sarah's schedule. She left Luke's room at 6 p.m. each evening to eat in the cafeteria, always taking exactly 20 minutes. Corey entered through the east wing, took service stairs to the ICU, and moved past the nurse's station with the confidence of someone who belonged. Room 712. He pushed open the door. Luke lay motionless in the hospital bed, his face swollen and discolored. Bandages wrapped his head. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped steadily. He looked small, fragile, young. Corey stood at the bedside, memorizing every detail. The bruises, the bandages, the ventilator breathing for him. His son, the kid who pitched no-hitters and made honor roll and wanted to study engineering, reduced to this. He placed his hand over Luke's, careful of the 4 lines. "Hey, buddy," Corey whispered. "Dad's here. I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you. I'm sorry you had to face those cowards alone. But I promise you, I swear on everything I am, they're going to answer for this. Every single one of them." The machines beeped. Luke didn't stir. Corey leaned down, pressed his forehead to his son's hand. "You did good, trying to film them. Standing up for your rights. I taught you to be brave, to stand up to bullies. You did exactly what you should have done. This isn't your fault. It's theirs. And they're going to learn that actions have consequences." He stayed for 5 minutes, all he could risk. Then he slipped out before Sarah returned. In the parking lot, Corey sat in his car and allowed himself one moment. Just one. He put his head in his hands and let the rage and grief wash through him. Then he locked it down, compartmentalized it, channeled it into something useful. Tomorrow night. The warehouse. 8 against 1. But they didn't know they were already dead men. Chapter 3. The warehouse. Marine Drive at night was a ribbon of darkness interrupted by occasional streetlights. The industrial district sprawled for miles. Warehouses, container yards, rail lines. Perfect for people who wanted privacy. Corey parked his car 6 blocks from the target location and approached on foot, moving through shadows like he'd done in 24 countries. The warehouse was exactly as Wesley's blueprints described. 3 stories, concrete construction, loading docks on the east side, single entrance on the west. Windows on the upper floors, most of them broken or boarded. He'd arrived 4 hours early to conduct reconnaissance. From a vantage point across the street, an abandoned building with a perfect sight line, Corey watched the warehouse through night vision optics. At 2,100 hours, the first vehicle arrived. Eddie Alexander's $80,000 pickup. Eddie stepped out, looked around with the casual confidence of someone who owned the world, then unlocked the warehouse door. Lights flicked on inside, yellow industrial fixtures visible through grimy windows. Over the next 30 minutes, the others arrived in pairs. Ray Knight with Marco Clements, John Turner with Brendan Sargent, Colin Simons with Sean O'Neill. Finally, Ricky Riley in a modified Jeep with light bars and aggressive tires. 8 detectives, all present, all armed. Corey could see the telltale bulges under their jackets. Through his optics, Corey watched them gather on the warehouse's second floor. They'd set up a comfortable space. Couches, a card table, mini fridge stocked with beer. On the walls, someone had hung thin blue line flags and shooting range targets. The celebration began. Bottles of whiskey appeared. Cards were dealt. And the laughter started. Loud, brash, confident. Ray Knight stood up, arms spread wide. Corey couldn't hear through the glass, but he watched Ray pantomime shoving someone, then throwing punches. The others laughed. Eddie Alexander stood and joined in, mimicking kicking someone on the ground. They were reenacting it. Luke's beating, turning his son's trauma into entertainment. Corey felt nothing. His training had taken over completely. Clinical assessment, tactical planning, execution parameters. These weren't human beings anymore. They were targets, objectives, problems to solve. He descended from his vantage point and moved toward the warehouse. His approach was methodical. Checking sight lines, identifying cameras, there were none, locating electrical panels, mapping escape routes. The building was scheduled for demolition, so security was minimal. Corey entered through a service entrance on the north side, a door with a broken lock, likely how the detectives had first discovered this place. He moved through the ground floor, clearing rooms by muscle memory. Storage areas, empty offices, loading bays. Everything was abandoned, dust-covered, forgotten. He found the stairs and climbed silently to the second floor. The voices grew louder, argumentative now, alcohol fueling bravado. Someone mentioned Luke by name, and the laughter intensified. Corey reached the second floor landing and assessed. The detectives were gathered in a large open space that had once been a supervisor's office. One entrance, windows on 3 walls. No tactical advantage for them. Perfect kill zone for him. But he wasn't here to kill. He was here to teach. He checked his weapons one final time, then stepped into the doorway. Evening, detectives. The reaction was instant. 8 heads snapped toward him, hands reaching for weapons. But Corey had already drawn his Glock, held it at low ready, non-threatening, but prepared. "Who the fuck are you?" Eddie Alexander demanded, standing. His hand was on his service weapon, but he hadn't drawn yet. Cop instincts identify the threat first, then escalate. "I'm the father of the boy you beat into a coma 3 nights ago." Corey's voice was calm, conversational. Luke Pearson, 14 years old, honor student, baseball team captain, currently in the ICU at Emmanuel Hospital with a fractured skull and subdural hematoma. Ring any bells? Recognition flickered across their faces, followed by calculation. Ray Knight laughed, sharp, dismissive. "You that kid's dad? The one who thinks he's special because daddy's in the military?" Ray started moving laterally, trying to flank. "Your son assaulted a police officer. Resisted arrest. We used appropriate force to subdue him. He filmed you." Corey didn't move his weapon, didn't shift his stance. Exercised his First Amendment rights. "So you beat him unconscious. All 8 of you. Then you destroyed the evidence and filed false reports. You're in deep shit, friend," Marco Clements said, also moving. They were spreading out now, trying to create multiple angles. breaking and entering, threatening police officers. You're looking at 10 years minimum. I don't think so, Corey said quietly. See, I have 48 hours of authorized leave, and I have a very particular skill set. I've spent 15 years solving problems in places where the normal rules don't apply. You ate, you're a problem, and I'm here to solve you. Eddie's hand moved toward his weapon. Corey shot him in the thigh, a precise, controlled shot with a suppressed Glock that made barely more sound than a loud cough. Eddie collapsed, screaming, blood spreading across his jeans. The room exploded into chaos. 3 detectives drew their weapons. Corey moved like water, using their panic against them. He closed distance with Ray Knight, delivered a palm strike to Ray's wrist that sent his gun clattering, then swept Ray's legs and put him on the ground hard. John Turner got his weapon up, but Corey kicked the gun hand, redirected the barrel, then delivered a precise elbow to John's temple that shut down his consciousness like a light switch. Brendan's sergeant charged, big linebacker energy, no technique. Corey sidestepped, used Brendan's momentum against him, and sent him crashing through a folding table. 6 seconds. 3 detectives down. 5 remaining. Stop. Colin Simons had his weapon drawn, pointed at Corey. His hand was shaking. Stop, or I'll shoot. Corey holstered his Glock, raised his empty hands. Go ahead. Shoot me. Explain to investigators why 8 armed detectives were gathering at an off-books warehouse, a place owned by a criminal you're supposed to be investigating, and why you shot an unarmed man. I'm sure Internal Affairs will love that story. Colin's hand wavered. Behind him, Sean O'Neill was on his phone. Don't bother, Corey said. This building isn't a dead zone. No cell reception. I made sure of that. He'd installed a mobile jammer 3 hours ago, attached to the building's exterior electrical panel. Sean threw his phone in frustration. What the fuck do you want? Confessions. Corey's tone remained conversational, almost pleasant. Detailed, recorded confessions. You're going to tell me everything. Every complaint you've buried, every suspect you've beaten, every piece of evidence you've planted, every dollar you've stolen. And you're going to explain, in detail, why you beat my son. Ricky Riley laughed, a brittle, manic sound. You're insane. We're not confessing shit. You're one guy. We're 8 trained detectives. 7, Corey corrected, nodding at John Turner, who was still unconscious. And Eddie's not much use with a bullet in his leg. Marco, Brendan, and Ray are just now figuring out they might be concussed. That leaves 5 of you who are still fully functional. But you're not trained detectives. You're bullies with badges. There's a difference. You son of a bitch. Eddie gasped from the floor, clutching his leg. I'm going to kill you. No, Corey said simply. You're not. Then he smiled, cold, without mercy. But you're going to wish you could, because I have 6 hours for each of you, and I'm going to use every minute. The warehouse lights flickered once, then went dark. Corey had cut the power at the breaker box before entering. Emergency lights clicked on, casting everything in dim red shadows. And in those shadows, Corey went to work. Chapter 4, Confessions in Darkness. The emergency lights painted everything crimson. 7 detectives. John Turner was still unconscious, faced a nightmare they'd never imagined. In their world, they were the wolves. Civilians were sheep. The system protected them. But Corey Pearson wasn't part of their world. He'd spent the next hour systematically breaking their confidence. Not through torture, though the temptation burned, but through psychological warfare honed over 15 years of extracting information from hardened enemy combatants. He started with Eddie Alexander, still bleeding from the thigh wound, but not critically. Corey had hit the femoral artery, but missed the femur, painful, immobilizing, but survivable with pressure. He'd zip-tied Eddie's hands behind him and propped him against a support column. Let's start simple, Corey said, setting up his phone to record. Tell me about Luke Pearson. From the beginning. Fuck you, Eddie spat. Corey nodded thoughtfully, then walked to where Ray Knight was zip-tied. Without warning, he grabbed Ray's hand and bent back his index finger until something popped. Ray screamed. 1 finger, Corey said, returning to Eddie. You have 9 more. Ray has 10. Marco has 10. Let's do the math. That's 99 opportunities for you to decide cooperation is preferable to watching your friend suffer. We'll start over. Tell me about Luke Pearson. Eddie's eyes darted to Ray, who was gasping in pain. The others watched in horror. We got a call about a party, Eddie began, words tumbling out. Noise complaint. When we arrived, we could see through the windows, kids drinking beer, some smoking weed. Probable cause. We entered to conduct a search. And Luke, the Pearson kid, he pulled out his phone and started filming us. Talking about rights, due process, all that constitutional bullshit. I told him to stop. He refused. I attempted to confiscate the phone as evidence, and he pulled away. That's when Ray slammed him into the wall. Corey finished. I've seen the video. One of Luke's friends filmed the whole thing. Luke never touched you. He tried to turn away, and Ray grabbed him by the neck and threw him. Then you joined in. Then all 8 of you took turns beating a 14-year-old boy while he was on the ground, not resisting, begging you to stop. Eddie's face went pale. There's a video? Oh yes. Clear footage of 8 detectives committing aggravated assault on a minor. Civil rights violations under color of authority. Federal charges. But you knew that, didn't you? That's why you destroyed Luke's phone. That's why you filed false reports claiming he assaulted you first. I want a lawyer. Corey smiled without warmth. This isn't a police station. This isn't an interrogation. You're not under arrest. You're in an abandoned warehouse with someone who has 48 hours to get answers. And unlike you, I don't need to file a report when I'm done. He walked to Marco Clements, who'd been watching with growing dread. Marco was a big man, thick through the chest and shoulders, but Corey could see him trembling. Marco, Corey said conversationally, you've been a detective for 8 years. 23 excessive force complaints. 12 investigations. How many times have you beaten someone who couldn't fight back? I don't know what you mean. Corey sighed and walked to Brendan Sargent, who was zip-tied next to John Turner. John was starting to regain consciousness, groaning. Corey checked John's pupils, concussed but stable, then looked at Brendan. Your partner's going to wake up soon. When he does, I'm going to ask him about the family in Gresham last year. The one where you two performed a traffic stop that somehow escalated to you smashing the driver's face in his car hood 17 times. His wife filmed it from their doorstep. The department settled for $200,000. Your body cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. I'm going to ask John to tell me what really happened. If his story matches the official report, wonderful. If it doesn't, Corey let the implication hang. Brendan's eyes went wide. It wasn't supposed to be that bad. The guy mouthed off got in John's face. John lost his temper. I tried to pull him off, but you didn't report it, Corey finished. You corroborated John's false statement. You let an innocent man take a felony charge for assaulting an officer when the only assault was the one you two committed. Brendan was crying now, snot running from his nose. We didn't have a choice. Levy said if we reported it honestly, we'd both be fired. He said to stick to the script, let internal affairs do their thing, and it would blow over. Levy, Corey repeated. Captain Theodore Levy, your supervisor. The man who runs the gang task force and taught you that violence without consequences is just good police work. He turned to address all of them. That's the problem, isn't it? You were trained by a system that rewards aggression and punishes honesty. Theodore Levy built a crew of detectives who operate like enforcers. You conduct illegal searches, plant evidence, beat suspects, steal property, and the system protects you because you produce arrests. Numbers. Statistics. Political capital for the department. Colin Simons, the tech specialist, spoke up. His voice was shaking but defiant. You're lecturing us about morality? You shot Eddie. You assaulted us. You're committing multiple felonies right now. I am, Corey agreed. The difference is I know exactly what I'm doing and why. You ate. You convince yourselves the rules don't apply because you wear badges. You beat my son and laughed about it. You've terrorized dozens of people, destroyed lives, and faced zero consequences. Until tonight. He checked his watch. It's been 90 minutes. I have 46.5 hours remaining. That's a lot of time. So here's what's going to happen. You're each going to give me a detailed confession. Every crime, every victim, every lie. And I'm going to record it. Then I'm going to give those recordings to someone who will ensure the FBI's Civil Rights Division receives them. You'll face federal charges. No union protection, no internal affairs cover-up, No deputy chief father making phone calls. Just justice. And if we refuse? Sean O'Neill asked. He was the former SWAT operator, the most tactically trained of the group. He'd been quiet, watching, calculating. Then I start breaking bones until you reconsider. About time. Eddie Alexander, face ashen from blood loss, spoke up. You're going to kill us anyway. Why will we confess? Because I'm not going to kill you, Corey said. Death is too easy. You're going to live with what you've done. You're going to face trial. You're going to serve time in the same prison system you've been feeding for years, and the inmates are going to know you're cops. You're going to spend every day looking over your shoulder, waiting for retribution from someone whose life you destroyed. That's what you deserve. He walked back to Eddie. But first, you're going to apologize to my son. All of you. On camera. You're going to explain what you did and why it was wrong. And when Luke wakes up, because he will wake up, he's going to see these confessions and know that the men who hurt him face consequences. For the next 4 hours, Corey methodically extracted confessions. He started with Eddie, who, faced with the reality of permanent injury and no help coming, broke first. Eddie admitted to beating Luke, to destroying evidence, to filing false reports. He detailed their operations under Captain Levy, described how they split cash from illegal seizures, explained their system for covering each other's complaints. One by one, the others followed. Marco Clements confessed to 12 different incidents of theft during arrests. John Turner and Brendan Sargent admitted to planting drugs on suspects who couldn't afford lawyers. Colin Simons detailed how he doctored digital evidence, timestamps, GPS data, phone records, to strengthen cases that would have fallen apart under scrutiny. Sean O'Neill was harder. The former SWAT operator had been trained to resist interrogation. He stayed silent even as Corey applied pressure, not torture, but strategic discomfort. Extended stress positions, controlled pain compliance, psychological manipulation. Finally, at 0300 hours, Sean broke. Not because of pain, but because of a photograph. Corey had pulled up Sean's personnel file on his phone and showed him a picture of his daughter. 7 years old, blonde pigtails, bright smile. Her name is Melissa, Corey said quietly. She lives with your ex-wife in Vancouver. You get her every other weekend. She likes soccer and drawing and ice cream. He let that sink in. One day, she's going to ask what you did for a living. What are you going to tell her? Sean stared at the photo, tears streaming down his face. Then he started talking. By dawn, Corey had 8 confessions, detailed accounts of misconduct spanning years. Enough evidence to bury them all. Chapter 5, The Professional. At 0600 hours, Corey heard a vehicle approaching. He moved to a broken window and looked out. A black Dodge Charger, unmarked but clearly law enforcement. It parked next to the detective's vehicles, and a woman stepped out. Detective Camille Draper. She was 40, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She approached the warehouse cautiously, hand near her weapon but not drawn. Corey met her at the entrance. Detective Draper. Sergeant Pearson. She studied him, taking in the tactical gear, the calm demeanor, the barely visible bloodstains on his sleeve. Wesley said you were thorough. He didn't mention you were a one-man wrecking crew. How much did he tell you? Enough to know I should have come here 6 hours ago. But I was busy making sure no other units responded to this location. There were some anomalies in the dispatch system, emergency calls that got rerouted, traffic cameras that experienced temporary malfunctions. Funny how technology acts up sometimes. Corey almost smiled. Funny. Camille looked past him into the warehouse. They're all alive? All alive. Eddie Alexander has a gunshot wound to the thigh. He'll need medical attention in the next hour or so, but he's stable. John Turner has a concussion. The others are bruised and scared, but functional. And they've all confessed. He handed her his phone, which contained 8 video files. Everything you need. Multiple crimes, multiple victims. Federal civil rights violations. Conspiracy. Enough to put them away for decades. Camille scrolled through the files, her expression hardening as she watched. When she finished, she looked up at Corey. I've been building a case against these 8 for 2 years. Documented complaints, interviewed victims, traced their financial irregularities. But I could never get anyone to testify, People were too scared. And internal affairs kept burying my reports. Why? Because Captain Levy has friends in high places. And these 8, they're his crew, his enforcers. They've made a lot of politically useful arrests, seized a lot of property, generated a lot of positive press for the department. The brass didn't want to look too closely at their methods. But now you have confessions. Now I have confessions. Camille's smile was sharp, predatory. Recorded admissions that match victim statements. Evidence of a pattern. The FBI's been waiting for something like this. They've had a civil rights investigation open for 18 months, but they needed leverage. This will do nicely. She looked back at the warehouse. What are you going to do with them? I'm going to leave them here. Zip-tied, documented, ready for processing. You're going to call it in. Anonymous tip about suspicious activity at an abandoned warehouse. When patrol arrives, they'll find 8 detectives in compromising circumstances. Questions will be asked. Internal affairs will have to investigate. And you're going to ensure those video confessions reach the FBI. And you? I was never here. Camille nodded slowly. Wesley said you were smart. He also said your son is in the ICU. How is he? I don't know yet. I'm going to the hospital after this. I promised him consequences. I've delivered. Now I need to be there when he wakes up. He will wake up, Camille said firmly. Kids are resilient. And when he does, he's going to have a father who moved heaven and earth to make things right. She paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to do this. It shouldn't have been necessary. The system should have protected your son. But it didn't. No, it didn't. But it will protect other people's sons now. These 8 going down is going to open floodgates. Their victims will come forward. Patterns will emerge. More investigations. Captain Levy is going to find himself under a microscope. The whole corrupt structure is going to collapse. Corey looked back at the warehouse one more time. Inside, 8 men who'd thought themselves untouchable now sat in their own filth. Confessions recorded, futures destroyed. Justice wasn't always clean. It wasn't always official. But it was necessary. One more thing, Camille said. There's a 9th person you should know about. Corey tensed. Who? Terrence Decker. He owns this warehouse through a shell company. Former cop. Now runs security for organized crime. Levy's crew does enforcement work for him. Illegal searches, intimidation, evidence suppression. In exchange, Decker gives them access to this place and pays them cash. He's the one who taught them how to operate outside official channels. Where is he? Unknown. He's been off the grid since your son's beating. Wesley's inquiries must have spooked him. But he'll surface. Men like Decker always do. And when he does, he'll find a very different landscape. His 8 pet detectives gone. His operations exposed. The FBI looking for him. Corey filed that information away. Terrence Decker. Another problem to solve. But not today. Thank you, detective. Thank you, Sergeant. You did what needed to be done. Not many people have the skills or the courage. She handed back his phone. I'll give you a 30-minute head start before I make the call. That should be enough time for you to disappear. Corey nodded and walked toward his vehicle. Behind him, the warehouse stood silent in the morning light, a monument to consequences. Chapter 6, Awakening. Emmanuel Hospital looked different in daylight. Corey entered through the main entrance this time, no longer hiding. He'd cleaned up in a gas station bathroom, changed clothes, washed his face, concealed any evidence of the night's work. To anyone watching, he was just another worried family member. He took the elevator to the ICU, nodded at the nurse's station, and approached room 712. Through the window, he could see Sarah sitting beside Luke's bed. She hadn't changed clothes since yesterday. Her hair was tangled. Her eyes were red from crying. Corey pushed open the door. Sarah looked up, and her expression cycled through shock, relief, anger, and finally collapse. She stood and fell into his arms, sobbing. You're here, she gasped. Wesley said you were coming, but I didn't. I couldn't believe. I'm here. Corey held her tight, feeling her shake. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. They beat him, Corey. They beat our baby. I tried to stop them, but by the time I got there, they'd already arrested him and taken him away. And then the hospital called, and she couldn't continue. Over her shoulder, Corey looked at Luke. The swelling had gone down slightly. The bruises were fading from purple to yellow-green. But he was still unconscious, still fragile. What do the doctors say? Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. The brain swelling is decreasing. That's good. They're going to try to bring him out of the coma tomorrow. See if there's any permanent damage. But they won't know until he wakes up. And if he wakes up, her voice broke again. He'll wake up, Corey said firmly. Luke's strong. He's a fighter. He's 14. Sarah's anger flared suddenly. He's 14 years old, and 8 grown men beat him because he tried to film them. How is that possible? How do we live in a world where that's possible? Corey guided her to a chair, sat beside her. We don't. Not anymore. Sarah looked at him sharply. What does that mean? It means those 8 detectives are going to face consequences. Real consequences. Federal charges. Prison time. Their careers are over. How do you know that? Because I made sure of it. Sarah studied his face, reading the carefully controlled expression, the hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. She'd been married to him for 12 years. She knew what his calm tone meant. Corey, what did you do? What needed to be done? The system failed Luke. So I bypassed the system. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. His voice was gentle but firm. Trust me, Sarah, those men will pay for what they did. But you can't know the details. You need plausible deniability. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. I should be horrified. I should tell you that vigilante justice is wrong, that we need to trust the legal system. But I can't, because I've spent 3 days watching our son lie here, broken, while those 8 men walked free. So whatever you did, thank you. Corey squeezed her hand. They sat together in silence, watching Luke's chest rise and fall with the ventilator's rhythm. At 0900 hours, Dr. Miriam Hayes entered, Luke's neurosurgeon. She was 60, gray hair, kind eyes that had seen too much tragedy. Mr. and Mrs. Pearson, she said, we've been monitoring Luke's progress. The intracranial pressure has stabilized. We're going to begin reducing his sedation this afternoon. If all goes well, he should regain consciousness within 24 hours. And then, Sarah asked, then we assess. Brain injuries are unpredictable. We'll need to evaluate his cognitive function, motor skills, memory. But his youth is in his favor. Young brains are remarkably plastic, capable of healing and rewiring. I'm cautiously optimistic. After Dr. Hayes left, Corey and Sarah settled in a wait. Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications. Friends visited. Luke's teammates from baseball, kids from school who'd been at the party. They were all traumatized, some still sporting bruises from their own encounters with Levy's crew. One kid, Bobby McCarty, the friend who'd filmed the beating, pulled Corey aside in the hallway. Mr. Pearson, I wanted you to know, I gave the video to a lawyer. And to a detective, Camille something. I know it won't undo what happened, but at least there's proof. Corey put a hand on Bobby's shoulder. You did the right thing. That took courage. Luke was trying to do the right thing too. That's why they hurt him. Bobby's voice was thick with emotion. Is he going to be okay? He will be. And the men who hurt him, they're going to face justice. I promise you that. At 1,300 hours, Corey's phone buzzed. Wesley, turn on the news. Channel 8. Corey found a television in the waiting area. The local news was running a breaking story. 8 Portland detectives arrested in corruption probe. The anchor was reading from a teleprompter. In a stunning development, 8 members of the Portland Police Bureau's Metro Gang Task Force were arrested this morning following the discovery of evidence suggesting widespread corruption, excessive force, and civil rights violations. The detectives were found at an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, where investigators recovered video confessions detailing years of misconduct. Mugshots appeared on screen. Eddie Alexander, Ray Knight, Marco Clements, John Turner, Brendan Sargent, Colin Simons, Sean O'Neill, Ricky Riley. All of them looking shell-shocked, defeated. The anchor continued. The FBI has taken over the investigation, citing potential federal civil rights violations. Captain Theodore Levy, who supervised the accused detectives, has been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal affairs investigation. Sources say this could be the beginning of a broader probe into police misconduct in Portland. Sarah appeared beside Corey, watching the screen. She looked at the 8 men's faces, then at her husband. "You," she whispered. "You did this." Corey said nothing. Sarah leaned against him. "Good." Chapter 7. Resurrection. Luke woke up 36 hours later. It wasn't dramatic. No gasping, no sudden clarity. He simply opened his eyes, blinked against the light, and looked around in confusion. Sarah was there first, calling for Dr. Hayes, tears streaming down her face. Corey watched from the doorway as doctors and nurses swarmed the room, conducting tests, asking questions. Luke was groggy, disoriented, but responsive. He could move all his limbs. He knew his name, his birthday, his parents' names. "Do you remember what happened?" Dr. Hayes asked gently. Luke's face darkened. "The party. The cops. He looked at his mother, then passed her to Corey. "Dad, I'm here, buddy. They beat me. I tried to film them, and they beat me." Luke's voice was small, scared. "I couldn't stop them. They were too strong." "You did nothing wrong," Corey said firmly, moving to the bedside. "You stood up for your rights. You tried to document the truth. That's what I taught you to do. You were brave." "Where are they?" "The cops." Sarah and Corey exchanged glances. Then Corey said, "They've been arrested. All 8 of them. They're facing federal charges for what they did to you and others. They're going to prison." Luke processed this, his young face struggling with complex emotions: relief, anger, confusion. Ow! The truth came out. People spoke up. Evidence was gathered. Justice is being served. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Over the next week, Luke's recovery progressed. He had some memory gaps. Specific details from the beating were fuzzy, likely a mercy. He had headaches and needed physical therapy to rebuild his strength. But cognitively, he was intact. Dr. Hayes called it a remarkable outcome. Most patients with injuries this severe face permanent cognitive deficits, she told Corey privately. Luke is extraordinarily lucky. Another few minutes of that beating, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Corey thought about those 8 detectives, now sitting in county jail awaiting trial. They weren't lucky. They were paying. The media coverage intensified. Bobby McCarty's video went public. His mother authorized its release to the local news. The footage was damning. Clear evidence of 8 uniformed officers beating an unarmed teenager while he begged them to stop. Social media exploded. Protests formed outside the Justice Center. Civil rights organizations demanded systemic reform. The FBI's investigation expanded. Dozens of victims came forward. People Levy's crew had beaten, robbed, framed. The evidence was overwhelming. Federal prosecutors brought a 47-count indictment. Civil rights violations, conspiracy, theft, perjury, obstruction of justice. Captain Theodore Levy was arrested on week 2, charged with orchestrating the corruption scheme. His lawyer released a statement denying all allegations, but the confessions Corey had extracted, corroborated by financial records and victim testimony, painted a clear picture. The trial was set for 6 months out. Media outlets were calling it the biggest police corruption case in Portland's history. But there was still one loose end. Chapter 8. The Ninth Man. Terrence Decker surfaced 3 weeks after Luke woke up. Wesley called Corey with the information. He's back in Portland. Rented an apartment in Beaverton under an alias. But I've got a guy who spotted him at a pawn shop trying to sell watches. Probably stolen property from when he was still active. He's staying low, but he knows his whole operation is collapsing. He's connected to what happened to Luke. He gave Levy's crew the warehouse as their clubhouse, paid them cash to do enforcement work, intimidating his competitors, stealing from dealers he wanted to muscle out, planting evidence on people who crossed him. He's the architect of their corruption. Without Decker, Levy's crew would have just been typical bad cops. Decker turned them into organized criminals. Corey felt that familiar, cold clarity settle over him. Address. Corey, the FBI is looking for him too. If you interfere, address Wesley. A pause. Then Wesley rattled off a location in Beaverton, a rundown apartment complex near the transit center. What are you going to do? Have a conversation. Corey found Decker's apartment building easily. A 3-story complex with exterior stairs, graffiti on the walls, bars on the ground floor windows. Decker's unit was on the third floor, corner apartment with a view of the parking lot. Corey watched from across the street for an hour. No movement. But Decker's car, a 15-year-old BMW with tinted windows, was parked nearby. At 2,200 hours, Corey approached. He'd learned from the warehouse encounter. No confrontation, no violence. This time, he'd used different tools. He picked the apartment door lock in 15 seconds and slipped inside. The apartment was sparse, secondhand furniture, unpacked boxes, a laptop on a folding table. Terrence Decker sat on a couch watching television, a beer in one hand. He looked up, saw Corey, and his hand moved toward a gun on the coffee table. Corey was faster, crossing the distance and kicking the weapon away before Decker could reach it. "Who the hell?" Decker started, but Corey cut him off. Terrence Decker, former Portland police officer, dishonorable discharge for corruption in 2015. Now you run security for drug dealers and strip clubs, and you use crooked cops to enforce your operations. You're the reason my son is alive instead of dead. Decker was 53, heavy through the middle, thinning hair, the look of someone who'd given up on redemption. His eyes narrowed. "Pearson, I heard about you. You're the spec ops guy who tore through Levy's crew. I had help from your operations." Corey pulled up a chair, sat casually. "Those 8 detectives confessed to working for you. Federal prosecutors have financial records showing payments. You're facing RICO charges, racketeering, conspiracy, organized crime. If you're here to arrest me, I want a lawyer. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to give you a choice." Decker leaned back, calculating. "What kind of choice?" "The FBI is looking for you. They have enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. But their case is circumstantial, financial records, testimony from men trying to cut deals. If you fought it, you might beat some charges. Might spend a decade in prison instead of 2. Or you cooperate. Fully. You give prosecutors everything. Names of other dirty cops, details of your operations, locations of evidence. You testify against Levy and his crew. You help the FBI dismantle the entire network. In exchange, they'll offer you witness protection and a reduced sentence." Decker laughed bitterly. "Reduced to what? 15 years? I'm 53. I'll die in prison. Maybe, but you'll die knowing you did one decent thing. You'll help ensure the men who beat a 14-year-old boy go away forever. You'll prevent other kids from getting hurt. You'll expose a system of corruption that's been poisoning Portland for years." "Why would I do that?" Corey leaned forward. "Because if you don't, I'll come back. And next time, I won't offer a choice. I'll make sure you experience exactly what my son experienced. 8 against 1. No mercy. No help. Just consequences." Decker's face went pale. "You're threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. You have 48 hours to contact the FBI and offer cooperation. If you don't, I'll assume you've chosen the hard way, and I'll treat you accordingly." Corey stood, retrieved Decker's gun from where it had fallen, and emptied the magazine. He pocketed the ammunition and set the empty weapon on the table. 48 hours. Choose wisely. He left the apartment, descended the stairs, and walked back to his vehicle. Behind him, Terrence Decker sat in stunned silence, weighing his options. 2 days later, Decker walked into the FBI field office and asked for a deal. Chapter 9. Justice. 6 months later, the trial began. The federal courthouse in Portland was packed. Media, activists, victims, families. Luke attended some days, sitting beside Corey and Sarah, watching the men who'd hurt him face consequences. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Bobby McCarty's video played on repeat. The confessions Corey had extracted, though obtained under duress, were corroborated by independent evidence. Financial records showed patterns of theft. Cell phone data placed the detectives at crime scenes where victims claimed abuse. Terrence Decker testified for 6 days. He detailed how he'd recruited corrupt cops, paid them cash for enforcement work, used them to eliminate competition. He named other officers who'd participated. He provided documentation, ledgers, payment records, photographs of meetings. Captain Theodore Levy's lawyer tried to argue his client had been unaware of his detective's actions, But Decker's testimony destroyed that defense. He described meetings where Levy had personally directed operations, approved tactics, divided proceeds. The 8 detectives, Eddie Alexander, Ray Knight, Marco Clements, John Turner, Brennan Sargent, Colin Simons, Sean O'Neill, Ricky Riley, all pleaded guilty before trial, hoping for reduced sentences. It didn't help much. Eddie Alexander, 16 years federal prison. Ray Knight, 18 years. Marco Clements, 14 years. John Turner and Brennan Sargent, 12 years each. Colin Simons, 10 years. Sean O'Neill, 15 years. Ricky Riley, 13 years. Captain Theodore Levy went to trial and was convicted on all counts. 25 years. Terrence Decker, in exchange for cooperation, received 8 years, still a significant sentence, but he'd live to see freedom again. The sentences made national news. Reform advocates held them up as examples of accountability. Police unions protested, claiming the prosecution was politically motivated. But the evidence was too strong, the crimes too clear. On the day the verdicts came down, Corey took Luke to a batting cage in southeast Portland. Luke had been cleared for light physical activity, and he was determined to get back to baseball. They worked through a bucket of balls, Luke's swing gradually finding its rhythm. He was thinner than before, but his coordination was returning. Dr. Hayes had cleared him to try out for the team next season. After the last pitch, Luke set down the bat and looked at his father. "Dad, I know you did something. After they beat me. I don't know what exactly, but I know you were involved in how they got caught." Corey considered his response carefully. "Does it matter what I did?" "No, because they deserved it. They beat me and then laughed about it. They were going to get away with it until you stopped them." Luke's voice was steady, mature beyond his years. "So thank you. You don't need to thank me. I'm your father. Protecting you is what I do. But you taught me to stand up for what's right, to document injustice, to not be afraid of people in power. That's why I filmed them. Because you taught me that rights matter, that truth matters. And then when the truth wasn't enough, you made sure they faced consequences anyway." Corey pulled his son into a hug. "I'm proud of you. You were brave when it mattered. You did everything right. The system should have protected you. And when it didn't, I made sure justice happened anyway. Is that what you do in your job?" "Sometimes. I solve problems that don't have easy answers. I work in places where the normal rules don't apply. And yes, sometimes I have to make hard choices to protect people who can't protect themselves." Luke nodded, processing. "I want to be like you. Strong, capable, someone people can count on. You already are. You stood up to 8 armed men. You try to do the right thing, even knowing it might cost you. That's real strength, Luke. Not violence or tactics, moral courage. That's harder and more important." They packed up the equipment and headed to the car. As they drove home, Luke asked, "What happens now?" "To you. I go back to work in 2 weeks. Another deployment. But I'll be home for Christmas, and then I've got a desk assignment for a year, training new operators. I'll be around more." "Good. Mom missed you." "I missed you. I missed you too." That night, the Pearson family had dinner together. First time in months, all 3 of them were healthy and present. Sarah had cooked Luke's favorite meal, barbecue chicken, mac and cheese, cornbread. They talked about normal things, school, baseball, upcoming holidays. No mention of trials or detectives or trauma. For one evening, they were just a family. Later, after Luke went to bed, Corey and Sarah sat on the back porch. The Portland night was cool, clear, stars visible despite the city lights. "Wesley called today," Sarah said. "He told me the FBI wants to interview you about how you extracted those confessions." "I know. I'll talk to them. Explain that I acted within the scope of my authorized leave, that I used non-lethal methods to obtain voluntary statements from suspects. They won't pursue charges. The confessions led to too many other arrests. Prosecuting me would undermine their entire investigation. Will that work? It'll have to. The alternative is admitting their case is built on evidence obtained through methods they can't officially condone. They'll give me a pass because doing otherwise creates bigger problems." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I should tell you what you did was wrong. Vigilante justice, kidnapping, assault, those are crimes. You violated everything the justice system stands for. But you're not going to tell me that." "No, Because the justice system failed our son. Those 8 men would still be free if you hadn't intervened. Other kids would still be in danger. So as much as I believe in law and order and proper procedure, she took his hand. Thank you for not letting them get away with it. Corey squeezed her hand. I'd burn the world down for you and Luke. Always. They sat together under the stars, 2 people who'd survived a nightmare and come out stronger. Inside, their son slept peacefully, healing, dreaming of baseball and normal teenage things. The warehouse stood empty now, scheduled for demolition. The 8 detectives sat in federal prison, learning what it meant to be powerless. Captain Levy was in solitary, segregated from the general population for his own protection. Terrence Decker was in witness protection, starting over. And Sergeant Corey Pearson, soldier, father, operator, had learned that sometimes justice required stepping outside the system. That protecting your family meant doing things others couldn't or wouldn't do. That consequences, when properly applied, could reshape the world. He'd been given 48 hours and made them count. 6 hours per detective. It had been enough. The end. Epilogue. 2 years later, Luke graduated high school with honors. He'd been accepted to Oregon State on a partial baseball scholarship and planned to study engineering. His physical recovery was complete. His emotional recovery was ongoing. He still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched when he saw police cars. But he'd also become an advocate, speaking at schools about civil rights, filming public interactions with police, working with organizations that push for accountability. The boy who'd been beaten for trying to document injustice had become a young man dedicated to ensuring it never happened again. Corey attended the graduation ceremony in dress uniform. Medals earned in countries he couldn't name for operations he couldn't discuss. When Luke crossed the stage to receive his diploma, he looked directly at his father and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Corey nodded once. No words necessary. That evening, Wesley Pratt came by the house for a barbecue. He'd become an unofficial uncle to Luke, a trusted friend to the family. As they stood around the grill, Wesley handed Corey a beer. "You hear about Eddie Alexander?" "No." "Attacked in the prison yard last week. Broken jaw, fractured orbital bone. Apparently, an inmate recognized him from news coverage. Word got around what he'd done." Corey took a long drink. "I'm sure the prison administration will investigate thoroughly." "I'm sure they will." Wesley smiled. "Ray Knight's not doing much better. He's in protective custody, but even that's not totally safe. Turns out cops who beat kids aren't popular anywhere. Funny how that works." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Luke toss a baseball with friends in the backyard. The kid who'd almost died was now laughing, healthy whole. "You ever regret it?" Wesley asked. "Well, you did that night." "Not for a second." "Good. Because you saved more than just Luke. All those victims who came forward, all the corruption that got exposed, none of that happens without you. You broke the system open. I just created an opportunity for the truth to come out. However you want to frame it." Wesley raised his beer. "To consequences." Corey clinked bottles. "To consequences." In the distance, Luke wound up and threw a perfect strike. His friends cheered. Sarah called everyone inside for dinner. And Sergeant Corey Pearson, father, soldier, the man who'd given 8 corrupt detectives exactly what they deserved, smiled and joined his family, knowing he'd made the right choice. Sometimes justice required a gentle hand. Sometimes it required 48 hours and a warehouse. He'd given them both, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.